Hello everyone, so today we're going to be talking about Poleaxe designs. If you guys have been following my channel over the last couple of months, I've been building these Poleaxes. The reason why I got into building Poleaxes is because, I was interested in buying one, right? But what I saw is in like the $300 range, they tend to be junk, okay? And to get a one that is like that of a really good quality, you had to spend like close to $1,000 on these. And it just said, you know what, let me, I work with metal, let me just build these, okay? So, like when it comes to swords, you got a lot more options when it comes to buying swords. Like in the $300-400 range, you can get some really good quality swords. Okay, so like this one over here, I doubt I paid more than $300 for this, and this is like my favorite. It's light, it's nimble, has a nice balance. Okay, so you can spend like $300-400, and you can get yourself a really good sword. But that doesn't seem to be the case with poleaxes. Okay, so what I want to talk about in this video is the different construction designs. Okay, first let's talk about what a poleaxe is. Okay? So a poleaxe is basically a polearm where the head is composed of two pieces. Right, so it's a two-piece head construction. You have a top spike that typically comes down and locks the hammer or the axe in place. Okay, so the head is two pieces as opposed to a halberd, which is one piece. Okay, so over here I have the example of a halberd. Okay, so this is still a work in process, but as you can see here, it is a single piece that basically sockets down onto the shaft. Okay, so it's not fitted yet. I haven't put a rivet through it, but this head here, right, where you have something that looks like a hammer here, something that looks like a spike. I mean, this can be shaped to look almost exactly like those others, but the spike and the hammer are a single piece of metal, okay? Versus the poleaxe, which is two pieces of metal. Now the halberds usually are thinner, because a lot of times when you look at it from the side, it looks like it's a really big thing. But if you look at it, from this side here, you'll see that they're very thin, and that's why the halberds are typically very long, right? Because you can have something that's if the head, if there's less weight on that end, it can go on the longer shaft. Okay, so halberds, even though the head may look bigger from the side, right, it tends to be thinner, which makes it lighter, and it can go on a longer shaft, and that's why halberds are typically longer. Okay, so with poleaxes, right, two-piece construction, and usually when you're trying to build a poleaxe, there's a question you got to ask yourself: is the top spike going through the head, or is it going around the head? Okay, so those are the two primary construction methods. One where you have a hole or an eye in the top of the axe or the hammer here, and basically the legs go through that hole. And there's usually some type of a shoulder here, right, that where it stops, right? So the spike goes through it, it stops when it reaches the shoulder here, and then the legs will spread out and they'll sit on top of the shaft, and that's what locks this hammer in place, right? There's no rivets, there's nothing else here. It's just that basically the spike is bigger on top and bigger on underneath, and that's what locks the hammer in place. Okay, so on this one over here, I employed the same method, okay, where this blade over here, it's kind of like a sword where, there's a shoulder here and there's a tang on the inside over here that gets thinner, so that tang goes through the eye, right, and then it spreads a little bit and it sits on the shaft over here, okay? So this employs the same method. Now, with this style over here, in order to lock this in place, right, like I said, it needed to spread out over here. So the wood or the shaft here needed to be thicker in order to effectively lock this in place, right? If this didn't spread, this couldn't get locked in place. So the cost of that is that you've got a lot more weight over here. So when you see a thick shaft like this, it tends to be a little bit shorter, right? Because again, the more weight I got on this end over here, you know, the shaft ends up being shorter. So with this is as long as I could go and be able to hold this from the end, you know, swing it and recover. You know, I can always shorten this up if I need to, but then I can, you know, I can go long, you know, use my full range if I need to. But that's the cost of this design here, where it needs to spread, right? It needs to get wider, so that means this needs to be thicker, and it also needs to be heavier. Now, on this one over here, which uses the same method of going through the eye, right, or through the hole, I wanted to make this one longer, right? You can see how this one is longer. So the method, what I did here, in order to make this longer, I needed to make this lighter. So I made this thinner over here. So this also has a shoulder over here, right? So the head, so basically it passes through the eye. The head stops when it hits the shoulder. The legs spread out a little bit, but I don't have too much of a shoulder out here, right? Because I wanted to make this lighter. That's why I used the blade here instead of a spike, which is thicker, right? So this one over here, you can see that's a spike, four-sided spike. So naturally, that's going to be a little bit heavier. So on this one, I made a blade, which is a little bit thinner, and the shoulder's a little bit more narrow. And also, when the legs spread here, they don't quite spread as much, and that's what allowed this to be lighter over here. And I can hold this on the end, right? And I can swing this around and recover. You know, and this is now fast and nimble. The problem that I had here is because there's so little material above and below the head, I didn't feel that this could like reliably hold this in place, as this does a lot of hitting. So what I had to do is I had to put 2 rivets through the head over here, right, to hold the head in place. Okay, so this is a historical style, a historical construction method that you will see where they pass rivets through the head to hold the axe head in place. Okay, now a lot of times you will see it as a side spike. Okay, so a lot of times when you look at these axes, they have these spikes that they stick out from the sides over here, and you look at it and it's like, ooh, really intimidating. You can hit people, you know, with either side, you know, with this side, that side, or that side. My feeling is that you really don't want to hit people with the side spikes because that's really a fastener, right? And if you hit people with the thing that's holding this thing together, it's more likely that at some point with enough impacts, those rivets, those side spikes are going to come loose. So there's 2 ways that those side spikes were attached. Either as a clinch rivet, where the side spike is basically on the inside, it's a nail. So you kind of hammer the spike through, and then when it hits the metal on the other side, it'll bend down, right, and it holds it in place. Or the one that Talhofer shows, where they basically screw in. So you know, screwing something into wood, or even if you have the 2 spikes kind of screwing into each other, like a Chicago style rivet, that's, you know. If you're hitting people with that fastener, it's, you know, that's kind of like your weakest point. All right, that's the thing that's going to break. So you don't want to hit people with your side spike. You want to hit with this, or in this case, I could hit with this because there's enough metal here, right? There's 1/8 of an inch of metal on each side, so this is a hitting surface. So you want to hit with this. You don't want to hit with your side spikes or your rivets. On this design here, I've actually, like, I pinched it, like I hammered it in, right? See how I've got it wasted? And that kind of protects the rivets, right? It's less likely that those rivets are going to get hit over there, okay? So that's another way that the head can be fastened. Now, the other way, let me show you the other way, is where the top spike, same deal, you've got the legs, right? But what the legs do is they go around the head instead of through the head, right? So the head here is kind of like, you see how it's pinched here, right? I hammered it pretty thin over here, and it comes down and it comes down to the shaft, locks it in place because I passed these rivets through over here. So there's no need to put rivets through the head over here. In fact, I don't think it's a good idea because there's very little material, right, in this section over here because I've pinched it down so much. So the great thing about this design over here is I don't have to be thick like this, right? Because this needed to be thick down here in order to lock that head in place. And I don't need to pass a rivet through the head like I did with this design here, right? So this is, I think this is a really good balance where I can taper the shaft a little bit, right? For you know, to take the weight off. So this is really fast, you know, and nimble, and I can, you know, swing this and recover, right? You know, I can shorten it up, attack with that end, right? I got an end plate here for smashing. You know, then I can go to full extension. So the benefit of this design here, where the legs come around the shaft, I don't have to pass a rivet through the head, and I don't have to make the shaft really thick over here in order to lock the axe head or the hammer in place. So I think that this, you know, this is my personal favorite construction method, and I'm actually planning to make another one like this. Just basically put this style of a head in there, and just have the legs come around. I can still, instead of having a blade here, I'm going to use this spike style here, but you know, and just have the legs come around the head instead of through the head. So obviously this is going to be thinner in this section here, so the legs can go around it. Okay, but it doesn't need to be as thick as I have this shaft over here. Now, if you look at these Poleaxes, you'll notice that I've got steel all the way down, right? This is actually based on a historical design in the Wallace collection, number A925, where it shows steel reinforcements not just up here, but all the way down. I've come to really like it. Number one, over here, the steel comes all the way to the edge, right? And there's an 1/8 of an inch of steel on both sides. So again, this is a hitting surface. In fact, this is the center of percussion right here. This is like the hardest part of this. Okay, for me, like the head over here, that kind of just gives you a little bit extra reach, you know, past somebody's defense. So that's kind of what I see the purpose of the head. And then the spike here is for, you know, obviously for thrusting into gaps. Yeah, so the langets here basically provide a hitting surface over here. And then what I did down here, they reinforce the shaft because I had two choices, right? I could either make the shaft thicker, okay, or I could put steel here, okay? So those are the two choices. So I prefer to have the shaft a little bit thinner, right? So the wood here is only like 3/4 of an inch thick, which ordinarily would not be enough, right? If you push down on it, it's going to give, even if you're using oak. But because I've reinforced it with the steel over here, and this is 1/16, like up here it's 1/8 thickness on each side, right? So that's 1/4 inch of total steel up here. Down here it's like a 1/16 I've made it, right? Which is like a total of like 1/8. So that makes this plenty rigid that I could keep the wood fairly thin and not have to go to a really thick shaft. On this one over here, you know, I actually left the steel down here 1/8 of an inch thick on both sides. Okay, so it's 1/8 of an inch up here, and I continue that same thickness down there. But of course, it adds a little bit to the, you know, a little extra weight to the shaft. So anyway, those are my. I just wanted to share my thoughts on construction of poleaxes. I mean, there's lots of people that talk about forging swords, and there's lots of different companies that make swords and sell swords. But when it comes to making polearms, there's not that many options out there. So that's why I got into building these things, and I want to share that with you guys. So drop some comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you all soon.